I can't believe it. I did that myself. I clicked all those buttons all by myself. Yes, Carolyn is here with me today. She's in charge of the music. Breeze, caress the trees, tenderly. That's for my daughter. Yes, you can switch it off now. We're going to fade out. Great. Thank you very much, Carolyn. I made that for my daughter quite a while ago, actually. I'm not sure she appreciates it, but I do like to sing. And of course, now it's also for my grandson. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our show today. Today's topic is fathers, because it is, yes, it is, certainly in America anyway, it is Father's Day on Sunday. It's Father's Day on Sunday. All right. And before we begin, I'd just like to say hello to my spirit guide Gregor, who, as always, is standing right by my side, to my right side. Say good morning to Carolyn. Good morning, Carolyn.
Morning, Carolyn.
Good morning, Carolyn. And this is her MO now. You know, you have to do, you can never, ever again not say good morning, Carolyn, right? All right. And so today our topic is fathers. Now, you know, so many of us still have our fathers with us on this earth. So many of us still have our fathers with us, but in the spirit world. Today I'm going to be asking, going to be taking live questions, obviously, but I thought I'd start with one or two little anecdotes of my own. And my own father, now, most of you will know, some of you will not, but I grew up in a very let's say strict household. My father was a sergeant in the army, in the British Army, and his entire life was wearing uniform. He was what they call in England, he was a lifer. Now I know they apply that to prisons, people in prison, but I think they also apply it to the military as well. So my father was a lifer, and he only came out of the army when he was forced out. I think he was 55, and in those days, 55 was it. You were done. You had to retire, and you didn't have a choice. If my father had had a choice, he'd have stayed in until he died, probably, because he loved the life. He loved the life, and he always used to say to me, because my mother would often say how many times my father could have been promoted, and how many times he took exams to be promoted and so on. And I think he did take those exams, and I think he could easily have been promoted. But my father believed that it was the sergeants who ran the army. And he always used to say to me, the officers look to the sergeants and the sergeant majors for their, they give instructions to them, and the men look to the sergeants for them to be told what to do. So my father always felt that he was in exactly the right position, and he loved his role. Of course, when he retired, my three sisters and I, we were then the little soldiers, and the amount of times he made us march around the garden, or we'd have to march around the house or whatever, and we'd have to march, and we'd have to say, what was that? He would make us say, left, left. I had a good home and I left. I had a good home. When I was a kid, I mean, my father left the army when I was 11. And as a kid of 11, my two sisters were 11, 13 and 15. And then my youngest sister was 10, and the four of us would be marching around the garden, left, left. I had a good home and I left. And we had to do it. And if we came out of step, we were in trouble. We had to keep the left to the left. And it's so funny because, all these years later, I mean, we were forced to do it, but all these many, many, many years later, I was with my darling boy, with my grandson. They came for my birthday. My daughter and my grandson came for my birthday, and he's 4 years old. And I was holding his hand, and he knows his left and his right. He knows all of that stuff. And I had him holding his hand, and I had him going around the room and outside, and we were left, and he thought it was great fun. I had a good home, and he doesn't know what that means, but That's what the British soldiers used to march to, I suppose, during the war years. And when it was, you know, enforced subscription, everybody at a certain age in England, certainly, and I think here in the States as well, you got to a certain age and you had to go in the army and you had to do your 2 or 3 year stint, whatever that was. So this was my father, and my father was a true blue warrior. He is, we're getting back to soul signs just a little bit, he is definitely an earth sign, definitely a warrior, and he has a daughter, me, who is an earth sign and a warrior. And so yes, we really, I suppose, clashed, and he was tougher on me than he was on anyone else. All of my siblings will agree with that. He was really a strict guy. I remember once I was 11 years old, and he sort of was brushing my hair, because he used to cut our hair for us, and we all had long hair. And I had some knots and tangles in the back of my hair, and probably I shouldn't have had them. But at 11 years old, when you've got long hair and mine's really fine, it's really hard sometimes to get the knots out. And we didn't have a kind mother who would brush our hair out for us, or a kind sister to do it for us. You did it yourself, and if you made a tangle, you made a tangle. And this one particular morning, I remember he was sort of combing my hair, and he was going to put it into braids, because that's how he liked us to wear our hair, in braids. And he came across these tangles, and the next thing, he got out his barber's kit, which is an old army kit, his scissors, his comb, and he had these clippers. And he cut my hair off. I mean, I had hair down my back, and he cut it off, and then he got the clippers and he shaved all the way up at the back of my head. I'm laughing about it now a little bit, but it wasn't funny at the time. It was embarrassing. It was awful. What he did was really, really awful. However, fast forward many, many years after my father died, very, very, long time after, actually, one of my first patients, a child patient, my first child patient, his name was Mark. And I met Mark. I was asked to go and see him. And he was 8 years old, this little boy, and he had cancer, and it was terminal. And his mother had been told he'd only got weeks to live. He'd been having treatment since he was 5 years old. That's almost half this little boy's life. He was being treated for this awful cancer. And when I walked in the door, I'm not very brave when it comes to children when they're sick. I'll do it, and you would never know that I wasn't brave, but I'm not great at it. I'm sort of quaking inside, because it's just heartrending when you see children specifically who cannot do anything for themselves. They can't help themselves, and you can see they're suffering and in pain. This little boy, his face was white. His eyes were huge, in a very thin face, and his eyes were sort of hollow, dark circles, and he had no hair. And it's the weirdest thing, because I did not, when I was a kid, lose my hair to cancer of any kind, but the embarrassment and the way that I felt with no hair was just awful. It was embarrassing, and I used to try whenever I could to wear a headscarf to cover it up, and it was like that for quite some time before it grew back. And if I had not had that experience, that awful experience for me as a kid, I wouldn't have been able to relate to Mark as I was able to. And I saw his hair, or lack of hair, and my mind immediately went back, not to the moment of my father cutting my hair, because that was just awful, because all I could do then was sit and cry and not dare make a sound, because if I'd have made a sound, I'd have definitely had a good beating along with no hair. But I remember sitting there with tears streaming down my face, and then the awful thing about having to go to school and see your friends and go to the guides group, and you have to you can't hide it. And I remembered not the act of my father cutting my hair. I remembered the feelings that I went through. And those feelings, when I looked at Mark, those feelings that I went through as a child, I was immediately able to be empathetic, not just to be sympathetic to Mark, but to be empathetic, because although I hadn't gone through such a terrible thing as him, still it was enough that I was able to feel empathy with this child, and all I wanted to do was wrap him in my arms. I remember sort of still staying with Mark for one more minute, because he means a great deal to me, this little boy. I remember one time I went to visit, and I would stay for 2 or 3 hours sometimes. I remember one time he was on the sofa, snuggled up in a blanket, and I was holding him, and we were talking about heaven, and his mum was somewhere, she was in the kitchen, I don't know what she was doing, but she wasn't there. Whenever she wasn't there, he felt that he was able to ask me questions that he couldn't ask his mum, because it would upset her too much. And also he was able to ask me questions without her hearing, but he would ask me questions about heaven. He'd say, Rosemary, what's heaven like? What do you think heaven's like? Are there really angels? And I would talk to him about heaven, and I would talk to him about the angels. And he knew he was dying. And his mother just kept holding out this hope, as of course a mother would do. And I remember one day, this particular day, I was laying on the sofa, and he said to me, Rosemary, I'm so tired, I just want to give up. And he just felt if he gave up, he would be betraying his mother. Anyway, back to fathers. So my father's act in cutting my hair gave me the ability and the understanding and the empathy to help this little boy, who not only lost his hair, but in fact, he did in fact lose his life. And he passed the spirit world not long after I knew him. But our fathers, I mean, they can be our heroes in a way, although my father used to beat me on a regular basis, and he never did it out of malice. He did it because he was the army sergeant, left. I had a good home life. That was him. That was how he knew how to deal with things, and that was how he knew how to deal with issues and situations. And my mother once said to me, which I since being an adult realized, your father's the way he is with you because he loves you the most. And I think he truly did. I think he really saw himself in me. But like any warrior, you can't have two chiefs. It's tough, there's got to be the big chief, and then there's got to be the little chiefs all around. And I was only a little chief because I was only a kid. So my father always had to exert that energy that he had. I mean, it was years ago, fathers had a role seems to me to be very different than the role they have now. I don't know if you find this, yes. Carolyn, but, people my age, our fathers were often tough. We were disciplined. And now it seems to me that, fathers have an opportunity to have a much more fun role, and it's the mothers who seem to have to do the discipline sometimes when the fathers are out playing basketball or baseball or whatever it is. I mean, it's difficult for me to speak about what fathers are now and what they were however many years ago, because you can only say from your own experience. So we're looking forward to hearing all your comments as you're listening to this. But I was telling Carolyn a very funny story, actually, again, when I was a kid, because, when we think of our fathers, when you get to my age or even Carolyn's age, you think about your fathers, you think back to when you were a kid. And, we lived in a bit of a rough area, and every kid in the school had nits. I don't know if you know what nits are, but nits are those nasty little head lice that you get crawling all over your hair. And because we had long hair also, I mean, we were, and these lice, nits as we called them, the nits are actually the eggs of the lice. But anyway, they can jump several feet. So you could be sitting quite, 2 desks away from another kid in your classroom, and bingo, that thing can leap over and lay its eggs, and there you have it. And I remember one time my father's remedy for me, I don't remember he did it to my sisters, but he certainly did it to me. He got a he had this big giant pot of DDT powder. Now, for those of you who don't know, I don't know what it stands for.
deadly.
Yeah, deadly stuff. But anyway, DDT, but it's deadly stuff that you actually, I don't think you buy it anymore. I think it's off the market.
Yeah,
I mean, you know, people would kill rats with it, or that. I mean, it's poison. It's very poisonous stuff. But my father had this big tub of, and it's like a greyish white powder that he had. And I remember it. So I had one night in the middle of the night, they found these nits in my hair, and the next thing I got dumped DDT powder all over my hair, and I had to go the whole rest of that week. I had to go a whole week with long grey hair. I was only 11 or 12 or something, but I had to go to school with grey hair because I've got this DDT powder in, and it stayed in until the weekly wash, which was the following week, you know, and that was it. I can tell you, I think all the lice were dead at this point. I did have them. I don't remember he ever did it again. He might have only done it once and then realised what he'd done and probably got nervous about it. I don't know. I mean, that could have given me brain cancer, any awful thing. But anyway, years ago, dads were very different than they are today. And I think in many ways that's a good thing, but I think in some ways it's not, because mums do need help with the discipline. Unfortunately, sometimes, you know, when a man shouts at a kid, it's hard because they shout in this manly way, and it sounds sometimes like almost like it's bullying. It's difficult for men these days to have a role. It's difficult, I think, for men, you know, in families to know where their role exactly is and how much discipline is enough and how much discipline is too much. And I think that, you know, men, I know women can have the same issues, but I think being masculine and being a man, you know, your voice is deeper and darker and all the rest of it. So I think that, you know, so many men do an amazing and a fantastic job. You may not be great husbands, but you can be great dads, for instance. Anyway, I'm rambling here. So
we've got some comments.
Do we have comments? Then before we have comments, can you move your drink from my clock? Because I can tell you, I know that Carolyn sneaked in, didn't you, last week? She sneaked in. We did an hour and a half last week, which is not going to happen today. And I've got my clock here now, so I'm paying attention. All right, darlings, let's have your comments and thoughts or questions or any of those things. Let's have the questions first, shall we, Carolyn?
Let's say hi real quick to Chris, your friend Chris. She's on.
Hi, Chris.
Dee from the Netherlands. She's joining us.
Hi, Dee from the Netherlands.
Ambra from Tennessee.
Hi.
Nate, Blanca, Dean, Sarah. Thank you all. Okay.
Okay. And anyone else who cares to join. Exactly. All right. Let's go. Let's have some questions, shall we?
Question?
Yeah, I think, you know what I'd like to do is, because for those of you who have fathers in the spirit world, and you know, when it comes to Father's Day, same with Mother's Day, if we have our loved ones are in the spirit world, these are the days that we think about them perhaps most, and these are the times that we wonder, are they there? I mean, and I want to assure everyone that I do believe that our fathers and our mothers and our families are with us in the spirit world. But as it's a Father's Day thing, yes, fathers are definitely there. And I just would like to address one question, because I had a friend who asked me this question, Mary Lou, we wrote it down sort of, I think. Anyway, so I'm going to address Mary Lou's question first, because she never gets to ask a question. So let's ask, it's a good question. So do you want to read that out?
Sure. How come when a father or grandfather leaves signs and messages, why do we either ignore or make them into what we want to hear?
You mean, she means a father or a grandfather who is in the spirit world. So, for instance, if you are used to hearing your father and he's giving you messages or trying to guide you in one way or another, let's say you're on the right path and you want them to know that, you know, and you're hoping that they know, and you're looking for a sign or a symbol, and you get it, and you can say, yeah, I'm on the right path. But what happens if you're on the wrong path? Do you think your father or your grandfather is going to show you or try to tell you, hey, you're on the wrong path here. There's heartache coming, you know. And very often that happens. And I know Mary Lou knows that that happens, that, you know, you have a father or a grandfather who's trying to tell his grandson, don't do this, boy, this is, you know, and telling them in so many ways, sending so many messages in one way or another. And it's very obvious to everybody else that this kid's going down the wrong path. But he says, well, my grandfather sent me a message and I saw this, or I heard that, or I did this. And you're ignoring the fact that they're trying to warn you, desperately trying to warn you sometimes, because you don't want to be warned. You want to go down that path. You want to do it regardless. Well, that's happened to me with Grey Eagle. He's often, not too often, thank goodness, but he has on occasion said to me, Now it's easy for me because I hear him. But if you don't hear, but you get, you know, somebody from the spirit world who is dropping all this stuff in your lap almost on a daily basis, you can't just say, oh, that's because he's happy. You've got to say to yourself, hang on a minute, why is he giving me so many messages? Maybe I should be thinking about what I'm doing. And I know that I'm capable of ignoring Grey Eagle. If I can turn a blind eye just like anybody else, I always regret it. Always, without a doubt, I always regret it when I turn a blind eye and I think to myself, well, you know, I have choices. I can make decisions for myself. Bang. And then I realize, whoops. So less and less and less am I going down that road of ignoring the messages. And more and more and more, when I'm hearing from the spirit world, when I hear things from the spirit world, when you hear signs and symbols, when you hear sounds or you see symbols or signs from your loved ones in the spirit world, whether it's your father, your mother, your brother, your uncle, whoever it is, when you see them, often, instead of saying to yourself, oh, that's because he's agreeing with me, you have to, if you can, step back and say, what is it that that they're trying to tell me here? Maybe I should be thinking a bit more cautiously. Maybe I should be taking things a little slower here, or that sort of thing. You know, don't just assume because your mother or your grandfather drops a penny in your lap that they're saying to you, good on you, good job, you're doing a great job. They're simply letting you know, we're here and we're watching. Doesn't mean we're necessarily approving. It might mean we're trying to warn you. But if somebody's going to turn a blind eye because they want to have that girlfriend no matter what, or they want to set up that business no matter what, even if they've been told the business will fail, or even if they've been told this is not the right path for you over and over again, but if somebody wants to do something, you just got to let them do it and take the consequences. And the consequences, if you're doing the wrong thing, if you're not paying attention, or if you're not being careful, stepping back and looking seriously at what you're doing, the consequences will be, you know, not so great for you. And I don't know why people turn a blind eye sometimes, but I've just told you I do. And I think it's because sometimes we just want what we want when we want it. Next question or comment.
We have Dee Dee, who says her dad is also in heaven. He died when she was just 17, and she misses him more since she's older.
Debbie?
Dee Dee.
Dee Dee. I'm so sorry for your loss, Dee Dee, but you know, I'm sure you know, here you are anyway, you must know that he is with you and that he will draw close to you. I think it's true that we do miss our loved ones as we get older. We sort of reminisce a bit more. We go back to thinking of the, you know, when we were kids, or when we did this or that. As we get older, we have more memories. And that often those memories do include our loved ones in the spirit world. And I personally, even the tough memories, even the DDT powder all over my head, it makes me smile. I mean, I value my memories, good and bad. I value them all, because the good memories can teach me something, and the bad memories can teach me something. So I value the memories, whatever they are. Let's have Annette.
We have Ambra, and she says,
hello, Ambra.
I know I have a male spirit guide. Is it one of my grandfathers who has crossed over? One I knew, one I never met. I would love to know.
Well, I wouldn't normally do this, but as you're asking the question, I'm going to say, well, I don't usually, occasionally I give messages on this particular show, but Greg has put his hand on my shoulder, so I guess I've got to answer your question, and I can't even remember what the question was, but it was something about two grandfathers, and you feel that you have a male
Spirit guide.
entity. I'm not going to call him a spirit guide. I know, but I'm not going to. You, darling, can call him what you like, and if you think he guides you and steers you, that's brilliant. And I think he does. And I think it's the grandfather that you know. And I don't know if you will understand this, but as I'm talking to Graylan, as he's explaining this to me, I think this man has, for whatever reason, he has some sadness and something to be sorry for, because Gregor is asking me to tell you that, he wasn't always great, and he's sorry for the mistakes that he made. But he is with you, and he stands by you, and he tries to steer and guide you. So you're right in that, darling. Yes, Dee Dee, you're right. You do have a grandfather who is with you, and working as your angel. Let's have our next.
Chris would like us to know that her father was ahead of the time with helping in the house. He cooked on the weekends, did dishes, laundry, bathed the children, and shampooed our hair.
Whoa.
Best scalp massage ever. And she said, her father said, "My word is my bond. He taught me when you make a promise, you must carry it through." Very valuable advice.
Well, yes. I mean, years ago, fathers didn't do those things, Chris. I mean, the fathers went to work, and the mothers often stayed home and took care of the children in the house, and the cooking and the cleaning. In my house, my father was, as I've said, an army sergeant. He was the breadwinner. My mother, however, chose to go to work. She was not a particularly maternal person, so she used to, send us to school. We went to school very early when I was in school, when I was 2 or something. As soon as she could move us on, she would. And she chose, as we were growing up, she chose to work in a carbon factory, standing in a concrete floor, concrete walls, in this old concrete warehouse with long trestle tables, and she folded carbon paper, and she did that all day long. Now, she didn't do it because she had to, and I would say most mothers, if you went to work, most mothers would go to work because they had to, not because they wanted to. My mother wanted to, because my mother wanted to have money to buy all of the luxuries. We had brocade curtains, we had lace at the windows, we had, what else do we have? We had Persian rugs on the floor, we had people come in to decorate. This is in a really rough neighborhood, in what we called a council estate, which was, people, the council of the town owned the houses. So whatever they did with the houses, I mean, most houses in our neighborhood, if they were lucky, they had linoleum on the floor, and if you weren't lucky, you had floorboards. In our house, we were posh, we were stuck up, my mother was called the lady. In our neighborhood, my mother was known as, referred to by everyone as the lady, and it was not, I can assure you, a compliment. They were not complimenting my mother in any way, shape, or form. But she went to work because she wanted all these luxuries. She wanted all the things that only the more well-off people would have. So she went to work and stood in the carbon factory, and all credit to her. You can't fault that. And then when she got all the things that she needed, and as we got older, she used the money, and she would go on sort of 6-month cruises. By the time I was 14 or 15, my mother was going off for 6 months of the year. She would go on a 6-week cruise to Australia. She would stay there for 3 months, and then she'd come back on another 6-week cruise, and she earned her money. She was a cleaning lady. She folded carbon paper. I mean, my mother did what it took to earn the money to do whatever it was she wanted to do. And talking of fathers, this is how wonderful my parents' relationship was. Not. My father had a really great sense of humor, actually. I think that's where we get it from, because most of my family have a great sense of humor. And my father would say to my mother, I'll give you the money to go. You find the money to come back. So he would give us the money to go. And it's, you know, most people would say, I'll give you half. But my father would, you know, preface, I'll give you the money to go. You can find the money to come back. And he was always hoping that she would never come back. So this 6 months at a time thing was perfect for him, because they had the most dreadful relationship. They had an awful relationship. So it was much better that they were separated. What a weird house I grew up in. Certainly today it would be known as dysfunctional. In those days growing up, and in my neighborhood, it was known as normal. So it's like, you know, husbands beat their wives and what have you. But anyway, all right, next, let's have our next.
We've got Dean, who says,
well, Dean, before he says anything at all, I know that he has several children. Can't remember how many, but
8, I believe.
But I'm going to say, Dean, that I think from some of the things you've told me over the years, I think you actually are a great dad.
Oh my.
So that's what I think. So anyway, what is Dean saying?
Dean says, I was Mr. Mom and raised my kids while also working many jobs. I did all the things that are not usually associated with male roles.
See, I told you he was a great dad.
And he says, my dad had a great sense of humor and always telling jokes. Do you think he's still telling jokes?
That's a sneaky way of saying, can you see my father? Or can you? And you know what, Dean? As it's Father's Day, I think, I'm looking to Grey Eagle. Grey Eagle has his hand on my shoulder as we're talking here. And Grey Eagle says he just wants to say hi. Does he still have a sense of humor? Without a doubt. Without a doubt. And just because now we're doing this, just because standing next to your dad is this little lady, but she has the most shocking white hair, really white, not grey, but definitely beautiful head of white hair. And she wants you to know, she's with your dad, and she wants you to know that you know, they're often laughing. So that's that. Next question. Do we have another question? No, she's typing on the phone. So
I'm trying to get clarification.
All right. Okay. So here's the thing about my father, which, you know, is odd, because my father certainly beat me many times. He had a thing about control. He was a very strict and a very stern man, and he believed in that strictness. I mean, we were girls, and, you know, and it didn't matter to him, you know. He was an army man, and you did what you were told when you were told, and if you weren't quick enough, if you were lucky, you got a smack across the head if you were lucky. But my father rarely would strike out, you know, impulsively. He was much more calculated. Go upstairs, sit at the top of the stairs, talk amongst yourselves, whoever was the guilty part, you know, who made the footprint in the garden, come and own up. And then it would be go upstairs, take your pants off, lean over the bed and wait for me to come up. Sometimes he'd make you wait there for ages with your little bum sticking up in the air. And this went on until I was 16 years old, was the last time he did that to me. And you know, so he sounds like a really awful man, but actually I loved my father and love my father still, because he was a huge, big disciplinarian, but he didn't know anything else. He was the youngest of something like 15 or 16 kids, I think it was. He went in the army. He lied about his age. You know, lots of fathers years ago did not know that their role was anything other than to be the disciplinarian. They went to work. The mother would say, if you're not careful, I'll tell your dad when he comes home. And the punishments were often left to the father. and I think that role has completely changed now. I don't think that's that's not the role at all anymore. And in fact, the role of parents has completely changed. It's not just fathers who have changed. The role of parents, I think, has completely changed. I mean, you can no longer give your child a smack bottom without fear of somebody saying you're beating your kid. It's very tough. I would not like to be a parent today. I'm loving being a grandparent, but I would not like to be a parent because there are so many do's and don'ts, so many rules and regulations, and there's so much that kids get today that we never had. We didn't have. If you were lucky, you got a whip and top, and that was your toy. That was it. We didn't have computers. We didn't have phones. We didn't have any of these things. So the whole parenting thing and the relationship between parents and children has changed drastically now. Let's have another question or comment or whatever.
Christina said,
Hi, Christina.
My father was a simple mason and raised 6 children. I am so grateful to him. He is my hero. Though lately I have made him believe the opposite when suddenly my husband flew away in heaven. And so I'm trying to, I asked her if she lost her husband as well, but she hasn't replied yet.
Okay, not quite understanding that, but I think it's wonderful when I hear people talk about their fathers and how special their fathers are. I mean, I have a grandson who thinks his father is very special, and that's as it should be. And as I've already said, even for those of us, I mean, with my daughter and her father, I always tried to help her to see the positive. Even when he left us destitute and never connected with her again until she was in her late teens or early 20s. He left when she was 10. I would often say to her, Daddy doesn't love me anymore, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't love you. Well, unfortunately, actions speak louder than words, and when you don't hear them from your daddy until you're 18 or 19 and you haven't heard from him, and for all he knows, you're starving on the street, because he did leave us destitute. He left us with lots of money. With lots of debt, should I say. He left us, not in a good position. But I always wanted Samantha to have a good dad. So no matter how much, if any of you are struggling in a relationship with your husband and you have children, I try to say to people, whatever is going on between you and your husband, try and keep it away from the kids, because no matter how awful your husband may or may not be to you, or your wife, whichever, kids benefit from two parents. I don't necessarily benefit from two parents arguing and fighting, but nevertheless, it is important that kids know both parents, I think, unless of course you're dealing with a particular situation whereby one of those parents is really not a nice person. It would break my heart for my grandson not to have a daddy who he loves, and it would break my heart for him not to have a mama who he loves, and of course he loves them both. They're both good parents to him. And I think that's what we should strive to be. And I think that's when we talk about Father's Day and we're remembering. Yes, I do remember when my father tipped DDT powder on me, and I do remember the good highs. I remember all of those things. But I also remember how he spent 15-20 minutes telling me how to cook a turkey one year while I was taping him surreptitiously. And being a warrior, being particular, and being a teacher and instructing, it's the most hilarious recording, one of the most hilarious recordings I've ever made, because he's so serious about telling me how to cook this turkey. But all those years later, he died when my daughter was 6 and she's now 46. So he died 40 years ago. And 40 years on, I don't think there's ever a time that I cook a turkey, ever, where I don't remember my father telling me very seriously how to cook a turkey, and he was right, and I cook perfect turkeys thanks to my daddy. So always, even though you have these maybe sometimes not so good memories, there are always these things you can find that are absolutely fabulous and perfect and just for you. I remember another, I'm going to tell you a very quick story about my brother, who was a mercenary. He was in the Congo as a soldier in the Congo, which is now, it was Rhodesia and it's now Zimbabwe. And he went missing. And he was missing for months and months and months, and nobody knew if he was dead or alive. Until one day I turned up at the house. I was 16 or 17 or something at the time. I turned up at the house, and there was all of his kit bag and everything in the middle of the living room. And my father was sitting in a chair waiting for me. And my father and I, we didn't have a relationship where we talked to each other. And in fact, all the months that my brother was missing, not one of us said a word to anybody else about it. Nobody, my parents certainly didn't tell us, don't worry, he'll be okay, or anything like that. We just all pretended it wasn't happening. But I walked in this particular day, and my father was sitting there, and everybody else had gone down to the pub to celebrate. My father was waiting for me, and I saw all the stuff in the middle of the room, and I burst into tears. My father held out his hands to me, and he sat me on his knee, and I was sobbing and sobbing, and I was telling him that I'd prayed, and my father had always said there's no God, there's no such thing as a God. And he quietly whispered to me, he said, well, don't tell anyone else, but I've been doing a lot of praying as well. There are only 2 times my father sat me on his knee. That's one of them. Maybe I'll tell you about the other time another time. But there are 3 particular and special incidents in my life that I relate back to my father, which makes me love my father more than anything else, which I still do. So even those of you who've had bad relationship with your father, and I know it's hard for some of you, and I get why it's hard for some of you, but even so, I do like to think of the positives rather than the negatives. Let's have some more comments now, shall we?
Yes. Nate asks, is there such a thing as Father's Day in the spirit world?
I was just going to say, I'm not sure, but Greg Eagle is laughing and saying every day is Father's Day, because our fathers in the spirit world can come anytime to check on us, to look at us, to be with us. You know, they have much more freedom. They can see us much more clearly than they ever used to, because they have no earthly encumbrances and no earthly barriers. So for some fathers, I think Father's Day is every day. So there we have it.
Soshi, who...
oh, yes, Soshi. We're hoping we're saying it right this time, darling, but yes.
And you offered healing for both of her children this morning. She writes and she says, some days after my dad died, I had an incredible experience. I started to write a love message for my mom, apparently from my dad. Dear Rosemary, I would love to know if this was really my father.
I think what you're asking is, do you think your father was influencing you? And again, I don't usually get this personal, but I am asking Greg, or can we answer this? And apparently this, and I know this happens, we've got thunder coming. I hope we don't lose you all, but we've got massive thunderstorms overhead here. We've got big thunderstorms. All right, so it is very often the case when I'm writing, I know that there are times, and depending on the subject, I know there are times when I'm being influenced by Grey Eagle. So I'm feeling his thoughts, or he's transferring his thoughts to me. And often when I'm writing, and especially when I used to write longhand and I would use the pencil, it would literally flow from here through me to the pen or the pencil onto the paper. When I'm sketching, when I'm giving people consultations and I'll sketch out or I'll map something out for them, the same thing is happening. I'm being influenced by Grey Eagle. He's influencing me as to what I'm seeing and how I'm seeing and how I should portray what I'm seeing. So I think it is very probable that your father was certainly, let's say he had drawn close to you in that moment and was trying to influence you and to give you the right words that he was wanting to say to your mom. And I think that that's a very strong possibility. So yes, I'm going to say yes to that because Gregor has put his hand on my shoulder. So I'm going to say yes. Let's have our next question. No more questions? No more comments?
No, well, they're just kind of varied comments. They're very pieced. Let's see. Marissa's on here. We listened to her videos the other day.
Oh, yes, we did.
Yes. She's still in high school.
Oh, Marissa, you're lovely. First of all, we did listen to Marissa's videos. If anybody out there wants to know more, she has beautiful music in her soul. We loved it. And I especially love the piano playing, because I'm a piano player myself. I know I'm such a talented person. I can do all sorts of things. Anyway, yes. What was the question? Yes, we loved it. We really loved the music, and thank you for sharing that with us, Marissa. I don't know how old you are, but you look very pretty.
Dee Dee says that she lost her dad and her first and second husbands.
That's tough,
That
Dee
is very
That
tough.
is tough.
And Blanca is commenting that she says, my father and your father are very similar, Rosemary. Growing up, very strict, hitting and just very strict. Last time my dad hit me with the belt, I was 16, all because he did not hear my reply of okay when he told me to get the garbage. It was tough growing up. There was no messing around. I still have him, thank God, and I am happy he is with me.
So, so that it does, you do sound like you had a strict dad. And I think, I know that my father, in his later years, I know that he had regrets from time to time as to how tough he was, certainly on me. And as I've said, my siblings, it sounds like I'm saying to you, oh, I got the worst of it. But feeling sorry for myself, but I'm not at all. I actually did get the worst of it. My siblings all agree, yes. My father was way more strict with me than he was with anybody else. And I think it's because he was more frightened for me. He could see the sensitivity in me, I think, and he could see that. I remember once I was sort of mooning a bit over a boyfriend, and where was he? And my boyfriend, I loved him to pieces anyway, and he was gone away for the week, and I was on the piano and playing all these. Because I was only, whatever I was, 17 or 16 or 17 or something, and I was really sad and really dramatic about it. Sort of 17 years old, you do, you think you're so in love, and of course I was so in love. And my father had watched this going on, not saying a word. And then one day he, as I was in the sitting room, I was playing the piano, playing some romantic something or another about lost love or whatever. And my father came in he opened the door and he called me out. He said, come here. Well, of course, when you heard that from my father, it was come here. It was like a very stern voice. And you don't know what you're in trouble for, but you're in trouble for something. And I went to the door and I came out into the hallway, brought me out into the hallway, and I didn't know if I was going to get in trouble for something, I was going to get hit or what, but like you sort of, seize up, you get ready for it, you try and prepare yourself for it. And I was so not prepared for what he did, because he said, I want you to hold out your hand. Now, this must have taken my father some thought. As I've said, my father was not an impetuous man. Everything he did, he thought and planned beforehand. He said, hold out your hand. And I held up my hand. I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And he put a stone in my hand. He'd been into the garden and he got this big, heavy stone, just a stone from the garden, and he put it in my hand. He said, here, now hold it. And I'm holding it. I've no idea. I'm totally confused. And then he said to me, now, I want you to remember, you make your heart like that stone. That advice came from a man who'd been all over the world as a soldier, going undercover, going into the jungles, fighting, etc., etc. That came from a man who was married to a woman who just didn't know how to give love. That advice came from a man who at age 13 went into the army and didn't come out until he was 55. That advice came from the man who made us march around saying left, left, and all of that stuff. Okay, that was probably the worst piece of advice anybody could give anybody. But I knew that he was trying to help me. I knew he was, in that moment, I knew he was trying to save me. Because the last thing he wanted, my father, for me, and he never did this with any of the other children, which is why I'm saying to you, I think he loved me the most. Had the most affinity with me, probably is a better way of saying that. He wanted to protect me. And he wanted me to learn to protect myself. And having a heart of stone was his way of saying, don't get caught up, because if you don't have a heart of stone, you're going to get hurt. You're going to get really, really hurt. So I am grateful, so grateful that he did that. I never took his advice, thank goodness. It was the worst piece of advice. I'm seeing him standing off to my left here right now as I'm talking to you, just looking at me. But I'm grateful for the advice nevertheless, because it taught me how not to be. So I don't have a hard heart. I don't have a heart like stone. But I know there are so many people out there, men and women, and particularly men in a past age who, if you know, men don't cry was the thing. Now we say you know, I tell my grandson all the time, really strong men cry, really, really good strong men, they cry. Now his father will tell him men don't cry, and I will contradict him because that's who I am. Because I think good men should show their sensitivity and they should allow those emotions. Crying doesn't make a man weak. Crying shows how strong a man is. And that was something that my father, I think, never learned when he was here on this earth. He never understood. He wanted to protect himself at all times from all those emotions and all of those hurts that he must have had during his lifetime. And he so wanted to make sure that I was not going to be hurt, that I was not going to be in pain. Make your heart like this stone, is what he said to me. And it's the worst piece of advice I think I've ever had, but I'm so grateful for it just the same. And in that, looking back, I can see how much my father really loved me. He could never tell me he loved me, but boy, that told me how much he loved me.
Real quick, I just want to get back to Christina.
Go ahead.
She responded, her father passed away 8 years ago and her husband 1 year ago. And when she lost her husband, she was so full of anger and she blamed her father for not protecting them. That's what she was talking about.
I get that too. But you know, it's you can't blame other people. Well, you can, I suppose, but it's a you know, you're on a fool's errand if you're blaming somebody else for what happened, because things are meant to happen. Your husband, I'm so sorry for your loss, darling, but your husband went when it was his time. You can't go before your time. So whatever took him, however he passed, it was in God's time. Certainly not yours, I know. And, you know, when we lose someone on this earth, I would have liked my dad to have lived, you know, forever. He'd be 90 something or even 100 something. Now I have to work that out. But, you know, he was 70 when he died, and do the math. My daughter was 6, so it was 40 years ago. So it'd be 110 or something, I think. Anyway, we want our parents, even if we, you know, don't think that much of them, we don't want our loved ones to leave us. We want them to be there. And the worst thing about it, of course, is that we just assume. We don't live life as if it might be the last moment on this earth. And you can't live life in that way. But at the same time, this is why I'm trying to say to people, no matter how tough your upbringing, no matter how tough your father might have been or your mother might have been, if you can find it in your heart and in your mind and in your soul even to find even one little good thing about that person, if you can look for it, you'll find it, and just hold on to that good thing. I'm going to ask Karen. She doesn't know I'm going to ask this question, but Karen, do you have anything to say? Because I know you had a tough upbringing and a not such a great daddy. Do you want to say anything at all, or no?
Well,
Or she just keep quiet. You don't have to say
no,
anything.
it's fine. I was thinking while you were just
Do you want to come in here just a second and join in with this, just for a second?
I was just thinking that I had a stepfather as well as a biological father, but
All right, you had two daddies.
yes, well, kind of. But anyway, the first time I got married, my stepfather was walking me down, and I remember him saying, you don't have to do this.
Yeah.
You don't have to do this.
Uh-huh.
And at the time, I thought, why would he say that? That's such a bizarre thing.
He was trying to protect you.
Yes. And he and I clashed heads quite often and butted, but
there was the core of him was that he cared.
Yes, that he cared, and in times of trouble,
and in that moment, you do see that
Yes.
somebody cared. It's so funny you saying this, because my father said to me, my father came to pick me up in a taxi or whatever it was. Anyway, came to pick me up from the house to take me to the church, and we got in the car, and it's one of these cars. It's like a big taxi. It has seats on both sides, so we're sitting looking at each other. And my father says to me at some point, if you want to just keep going, just tell me and I'll tell the driver to just keep driving if you don't want to do this. And I so wanted to tell him that. I really so, yeah, it's another whole story. I'm going to cut you out here. I so wanted to tell my father, just keep driving. The unfortunate thing was that if he'd have just kept driving, where was I to go? Because I couldn't go back home. So where on earth was I to go? So, but yes, thank you for that story. Thank you for sharing that. Do we have anything else here?
He was the tough guy, and my biological father just wasn't around. We have, yes, I did. Chris, it says.
Excuse me.
And this
I'm not bored. I'm just tired. I'm yawning.
If humans were created with masculine or feminine energy, what is the value the masculine energy was to bring to Earth?
What? I have
if humans
no
were
idea
created,
what that question was about.
If humans were created with masculine or feminine energy, what is the value the masculine energy was to bring to Earth?
Right, I've no real idea of what that question's about, but I will say that we have different types of energy, masculine and feminine, but every person has some of each, actually. Just because you're a female doesn't mean that you don't have some masculine energy, and vice versa. We have more or less. The value is balance, I suppose. I don't really understand your question, number one, but if we're looking at energy and we're looking at the balance of, I'm not even sure it's female and male energy. I think or masculine and feminine. I think it's simply more sensitive or less sensitive in different areas. I find that a lot of men, and men should be the masculine, go to work and the breadwinners and all the rest of it, and that's how it used to be years ago in many societies. But in many other societies, it was the women who were the hunters and the fathers who were left. I mean, even in ancient times, there were many tribes and many cultures where the women went out to hunt and what have you, and the men stayed home and did all the cooking and so on. So it's not so unusual that men do it now, and it's not so unusual that we now have a lot of stay-at-home dads. I mean, you have to go where your energy, if you're a particular person, you have a particular energy. And quite frankly, if a woman is better off working and earning money in the office, and the man is better off at home and cooking, why not? It's, there's no detriment to that. Years ago, there would have been. But today, in today's age, I'm so proud of men who will teach their children to cook. I mean, why wouldn't you? And I love it when men cook, and I like to get in. I'm a cook, so I like to get involved. I find that some men can be so sensitive and really, really creative in that area, and cooking, knitting, whatever it is that used to be a woman's domain and now is it's a free-for-all. You do what you want to do, as we all should. I think that anything that brings out that creative and sensitive nature of a man is only to be applauded. And as a woman, I mean, I was a shop fitter. I walked around with my drill and my saw and my plane and my all of this years ago, and men would, I worked as a shop fitter, and men would come banging on the window and yelling at me, you're taking a man's job, no, because it's not the same anymore, which is, I think it's a good thing. But I also do think that it brings us a lot of confusion, because I think that a lot of people have confusion in the role of parenting, especially as to, where they should be, how they should be, and how strict they should be, etc., etc. I mean, I think that a lot of men struggle with the role. Then a lot of men struggle with the idea that women can do these things as well. You need to be a particularly liberated man in this day and age to be a happy man, to understand that the wife is not necessarily going to stay at home and take care of the kids. She's, she might want to go out and work for a living, and therefore, why don't you go out and take care of the kids? It's a difficult situation. It's it's a confusing role that we have now. But I think, as long as we're open and open-minded and loving and caring, I think there's no reason why we can't all be happy. It's all about acceptance and accepting each other. Do we have any other questions before?
Just one thing we need to make a little comment about.
Yeah.
We have Jean, and Jean's been having a rough time. She's
Hi,
been emailing
Jean.
you.
Hi, darling.
And she's asking, can you see our spirit guides? And if so, may I have the name of mine? But then we have Marissa, who is telling her that if you're unable to, she might be able to help her later. So I kindly ask that there's no solicitation.
All right, here's the thing. Yeah, we do need to address this, because I know that all of you who listen in, you're so nice and so kind, and you hear other people with their questions and you want to help. I can't do anything about that. If you want to connect with each other away from here, that's entirely your decision. Just so as you know, though, here's the thing. Just because you're watching this show does not mean that I am saying that everybody who connects in is what they say they are or who they say they are. I can't say to one person, oh yes, look, she says she's a medium, or she says she can do this and this, so you can go with her. I'm just advising all of you to be cautious when you offer help, and to be cautious if you want help, and to be cautious if you're taking help, because really we don't know each other, do we, too well? You all know me better than, of course, I know you. But what was the question again that Jean had? Who was her guide?
Her spirit guide?
All right, we've had this. I want you to go and have a look on YouTube, Jean, and go back, because we've talked about guides, spirit guides, angels, and helpers, and our family members, and so on. And most of us do not have spirit guides as such in the way that I view them. All right, just saying. I perhaps view spirit guides differently than you. We all do have someone who helps, and usually that person who helps us often can be a family member, which is not a spirit guide. A spirit guide is a very highly evolved spiritual entity who works full-time, 100% full-time, with someone like me, or healers, or people who work full-time in this spiritual area. So I would say, first of all, Jean, go back and see if you can find that YouTube. I don't know which one it is, but go back and see if you can find that, and listen to that, and listen to the differences. So then you'll know what you're asking. I do believe, however, because I'm asking Grey Eagle, Jean, and again, I don't usually do this, and we are over time, and I did say to everybody before we started, we're not going to go over time here, but here we are. We're going over time a little bit. But Jean, I feel very, very strongly that there is a lady with you. She's an older lady. She's sort of very sort of skinny. I'm not good on height. I'm going to say average height, but she's a skinny older lady. She's I would call her very bony because she's got no flesh on her bones whatsoever. And I can see her actually quite clearly when I'm talking to you and when I'm talking in relation to you. But I am not going to necessarily connect with her on a one-on-one because this is what Gregor is showing me. This is what Gregor is telling me. And I think she is an aunt. It's possible that she's a grandmother. And I do know this is so general. This is such a general thing. And this is what happens because, you know, this is not as if you and I, Jean, are sitting here for 50 minutes or something talking to each other and that I'm dealing with you personally. And this is why I'm very, very loath to give people information like this. However, if you can take what I'm saying with a little pinch of salt and do a little checking of your own then, you know, I do believe that you have a lady who is a family member, she's possibly an aunt, she might be a great aunt, who is, and the name of it, this is totally unexpected, it's either Ida or Lydia, I'm not sure which it is, that's the name I'm hearing. I don't know if that's helpful to you, but I feel that this lady is trying her best to help you and to take care of you. Please, Jean, just understand, darling, you're not on your own. We're all with you, and we're sending our healing prayers to you every day. All right? So please, you know, don't be on your own. And again, I'm just going to say, because we have had this happen before, where people want to come into this forum and they find it a forum for their own, you know, they want to help as well. And so I'm just advising you all to just be a little bit cautious. Be cautious if you're offering help because you're not sure what you're getting yourself into. Be cautious if you're accepting help from people you don't know. Just because they come on here and they're asking questions does not necessarily mean that they are what they say they are. So I'm just giving you a little bit of helpful advice. Be skeptical. So be cautious. Be cautious. Be cautious. I cannot confirm that anyone is what they say they are. I can only confirm me, and those of you who know me and trust me and come to this arena here with me, we enjoy this. But we just wanted to give you a little heads up because we've seen this happen again and again, time and again. Just be cautious, darlings. That's all I'm asking you. All right. In the meantime, I think we're done. If you want to connect with us, Rosemary at rosemaryaltea.com. Email us. If you want to find us, we're on Facebook. We are on Twitter. We are on Meetup. We're all over the place, in fact. And we're, of course, on YouTube. So, you know, if you want to find us, if you want to connect with us in any way, you know, so I would say start out with the email. Be careful if you're going to go to the website because our website is a bit tricky at the moment. We're having a few little problems with it. So if you need to ask a question or if you want to know more about us, if you email us and we'll show you where you can go to find out more. And I don't know what next week's topic is.
No, we hadn't gotten that far.
Okay,
but
all right.
We are anxiously awaiting soul signs.
Oh, soul signs is done. It's out. We were hoping for it to come today, weren't we?
It might be in the
It
mailbox.
might have been in the mailbox as we speak, but it will be here this week at some point because we were just notified. It was mailed out to us. Once we get it, you can get it. It's all right. So that's exciting news for us. In the meantime now, until next week, we'll let you know what the topic's going to be. And if you've got any ideas on a topic or a subject you'd like to discuss or you'd like for me to talk about, just let us know. Rosemary at rosemaryaltea.com. And in the meantime, my darlings, please, 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 as always, have a very, very, I just want to mention my grandson. I don't know why. He's playing the piano. Anyway, just that came from nowhere. In the meantime, anyway, until next week, please, please, please have a very, very blessed day.